Ladies and gentlemen, damas y caballeros, thank you for joining us for another episode of All the Angles, the business of paddle podcast worldwide, powered by the Hexagon Cup. This week, our mission is to give you, our audience, a unique insight into the world of content creation in and around professional paddle as well as amateur paddle. I'm joined this episode by two individuals who probably need very little introduction to those who follow the paddle ecosystem around the world. First of all, I have Sven who was in a previous life a high-level player for Holland, playing in the World Championships and the European Championships. He's a paddle instructor back in Holland, but he also launched Otro Nivel around 2019, which is now probably one of the leading international tuition podcasts in the paddle space. It has about 51,000 subscribers on YouTube, about 400 videos worth of content. But he also does other material with other sponsors as well. And also joining me and Sven is Pablo. Pablo launched the fourth set also in around 2019. It has two main language formats. One is the English format, which has about 300 videos, 34,000 subscribers, and around 15 million views. And his Spanish one, which is obviously his primary channel, has another 172,000 subscribers, with about 687 videos worth of content and 80 million views. So both well established in the space with strong followings around the world. Before we get started, if you enjoyed this episode or have benefited from previous ones, please like, share, subscribe. It definitely helps. Without further ado, let's get started. Guys, thank you for joining. I guess my first question is, let's go right to the beginning. You both started your channels around 2019. Pablo, your English one followed a few years later, but your Spanish one started around 2019. When you guys launched these channels, was your objective to create a sustainable content business standing alone, or what was the objective from the start?
Well, in my opinion, when I started to play paddle in the Netherlands, we just didn't know what we had to do. We did not know anything about paddle. We just started to play, and that was really fun. I just started to play a lot, and I was just starting to get used to the walls, to do a lot of training sessions. So I did a lot of 1-against-1 to learn to how to use the walls. Then I was selected to the Dutch team to play the World Cup. And then I came back and I thought, well, this is like a totally different world for me. So then I went to Spain to learn to play proper paddle. And then, because during the lockdown I was in Spain, I started the channel with a lot of videos with Herman Schaefer. And Herman could speak perfect English, and he knew a lot about paddle. So what I really wanted to do is to bring people to Spain to learn to play the real paddle, because that's what I experienced, that it was just completely different to the game that we play in the Netherlands. Because in the Netherlands we play so hard, so much before the glass, a lot of smashes. So I was like, well, if I could show the real paddle and can bring people to Spain to really see how paddle is played. Because if they just play against somebody from Spain and they get their asses kicked, this is so much more worth than giving somebody one paddle lesson. Mm-hmm. So then I was like, if I do videos about tips and tricks, because the only thing that I saw online were the videos of Dani Dios, which were super good. But I was like, yeah, well, I think we can tell in a different approach. And then the lockdown hit, and then I really started to record more videos, because that was the only thing I could do. So I think it was created not to make money per se, because I didn't thought that would be possible. Because paddle was not so big if you make content in English during the time, because the only one that was making the videos regularly was Sandy from the paddle school in English. And I made a few videos, and Sandy was like super early to contact me, like, wow, this is really fun, and thank you for also making content. So then I was like, okay, nice. This is a nice community if everybody helps each other. And then the lockdown was finished. And because we got a lot of views, I think already 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 with some videos. So then it was like, okay, well, let's do some more, because people really enjoy it. And I don't know where it's going to take us, but I'm just going to make some more videos.
When you had the channel, did you feel like it was a marketing initiative for your coaching, or that didn't really come into the equation?
No, not so much more. I really wanted them to train with the Argentinian and with the Spanish coaches because Herman, he's been playing paddle for 30 years. So who am I that people go to have sessions with me? I don't think that's valuable. I think if you are in the Netherlands, I can teach you what I learned in Spain.
Mhm.
But I think if you go to Spain, it would be nice to go to the source of paddle and somebody that has been playing for 30 years.
Got it. What about you, Pablo? Where did it all start? What was the vision? Was it to be this huge media empire, or it started off a little bit less ambitious?
First of all, thank you, Alex, for having us. I'm sorry because of my voice. I'm not in the best conditions. Well, my story is kind of similar to Sven, but quite different as well. So I was doing my last year of bachelor, the double bachelor in business administration and marketing. So I always wanted to somehow enter the sports industry. I mean, as I'm Spanish, probably you are thinking about football. I was thinking too, but since 2014, something like that, I fell in love with paddle so hard that in 2019, when I was doing my last year of bachelor, I wanted to join somehow the paddle industry. What was the problem? That I didn't know someone in the industry. I didn't be a good player. So it was quite hard because paddle at that time, even in Spain, it was super small. So the only idea that I had to create value to myself, it was to create videos because at that moment, Paquito and Lebron joined as a pair and no one was talking about that. There was just one YouTube channel creating content in Spanish that was Manu Martin, and everything was related to how to play paddle, how to do a volley, a bandeja, whatever. So I was more into these kind of players are gonna play together. No one is gonna talk about this. So I created my first video about that. The video got around 20K views, something like that. So I remember that I was watching the Australian Open, Nadal versus Federer back in that time, and I saw the YouTube Studio app and suddenly I got 10k views or something like that, like 1 week after. So I was, oh my god, I live close to Madrid but in a town that has 27,000 inhabitants. So I was thinking, oh my god, almost half of my town is watching my video. So since then, I try to create more content just to see what happens. Like Sven, I don't know, I didn't have any kind of strategy, any kind of goal, just to somehow enter to work in the paddle industry. And fortunately, it suddenly happened. I started working in Hook. Hook is a racket brand. They sponsor Mariano Amat, the former coach of Lebron and Galan. I've been there for 1 year and then I did my master's. I entered to work in the football industry as well. But I mean, at some point, I decided to bet everything on the content creation side of my life. So that's somehow my career.
And so you guys came in, you had an idea of what you wanted to do, but it was fairly narrow. And now, obviously, I think both of you have diversified the kind of content that you guys create. Obviously, it's still rooted, like Sven, yours is still very much rooted in tuition and learning and skills, whereas Pablo, similar to how you started, it's much more about the people, the players, the tour, but there is elements of coaching. When did you guys decide that you wanted to add strings to your bow or add elements to your core proposition? How did you develop that strategy? Because also there's an issue of tone of voice, right? Sven, yours is kind of light-hearted, quite jokey. Obviously, there's a lot to be learnt, but a lot of the original content was very serious and very technical, whereas yours is playful and technical. And Pablo, yours is also quite informal. You're not trying to create like a studio environment where it's really formal and you need to worry about what you're going to say. You want people in their natural environment talking as if they're talking to a good friend that they've known for a long time. And obviously, by now, they do know you for a long time. But I'm assuming that you guys didn't start with this idea of I'm going to do this kind of content, then in 1 year I'm going to do that content, then in 18 months I'm going to diversify to this content, and my tone of voice is this, and my proposition is that. Do you feel like you guys have had to formalize your approach to your content over time? Pablo, obviously you added the English later on, but apart from that, how did you roadmap or develop your proposition?
I mean, actually, I don't have a clear answer because I don't remember at what point I think that I did a strategy, like a proper strategy that I'm gonna do this or whatever. I always had some ideas. For example, this year I had a clear idea that I wanted to do like the training 5 days with Agustin Tapia in the Nox Future Academy, as we have signed with Nox as a sponsor. So these are more like isolate ideas more than a strategy. And that is something that worries me a lot, because I always try to create a straight highway for my life, but it's always like curves and curves. And so I can say that I have a clear strategy. I have some good ideas, in my opinion, for the next season, for example, for the next year, but I don't have a strategy. So, Alex, Sven, if you can help me, because I have ideas, but not a strategy. That's my resume. Like,
Mhm. And are there times when you guys do something and it unexpectedly does really well, or something unexpectedly does really badly? Pablo, have you had an idea where you're like, whoa, that went a lot better than I expected in terms of views and responses? Or indeed the opposite, something where you thought this idea I think is going to be really great and you've done it and just the views haven't backed it up?
for sure. I mean, probably Sven can't tell any more examples, but in my case, the one that I mentioned before, the experience like training in the NFA, in the Nox Future Academy, I expected to be a good idea, but not as good as it was, because every video got more than 100,000 views, many comments. It was the first time that we do like a kind of a blog format. We were doing it live somehow. And actually, I remember your comment, Alex, that I need to find a way to train, play matches and whatever, and don't work until 1 a.m. just to have the content ready for the next day. That was one of the best ideas that we have this year. And for example, one that didn't go as well as I expected was also with Tapia, for example, an idea that we launched 2 weeks ago, something like that, that with the launch of the new 8010s rackets, the Agustin Tapia's racket, we've been in Barcelona the day that Tapia recorded the advertisement. So we did an idea to see the rackets for the first time, somehow like a review, but at the same time a mystery box. And that video got around 50,000, 50,000 views. But somehow I expected more, because it's Tapia. So yeah, I mean, at the end you have like a balance.
And you, Sven?
So when I was in Denmark, World Padel Tour, I think it was 2 years ago, I did a lot of interviews with the pro players, and I expected a little bit more views because it was nice. We had a lot of comments, but I think 20 to 50,000 max. And sometimes we were 40 minutes, 50 minutes in the car. So like Gemma and Alejandra, I picked them up from the airport and I drove them
Oh, this
to
was
the
the
hotel.
carpool kind of.
Yeah, the carpool, Cupra carpool, not karaoke, but maybe we should have sang more songs. But I expected a little bit more. But it's also that my audience is more into learning paddle. So if I do things that are not into learning paddle, even though the pros give tips and tricks, I think if it's not on the court, I get less views. And I think that makes my channel a bit different from Pablo, is that he's also good in making the videos in his studio, and that is like Paddle news related. And if I make a video outside the court, it just doesn't really do that well. It's weird because I think that sometimes it's also good to talk about the pro players. But if I do that, the people, they don't really care so much.
And do you find that there's a variation to how silly you are in the video? So, for example, do you find that the more tongue in cheek you are in the video in terms of the tone and the jokes and the delivery, does that raise the views or lower the views? Do you have a sense of that?
No, I don't think it's a very big thing. It does get a lot of comments because sometimes people say I like the humor, but some people say more humor. So I think I have people from everywhere on the spectrum that they want to have tips and tricks. And some people, they think if I make too many jokes that my tips and tricks have less value.
Mm-hmm.
But in my honest opinion, I just do what I think is
Mm-hmm.
fun, or I just make the content that I want. I think if I make the videos how I want to make the videos, I will last long because then it's fun for me to do. And if something is not fun anymore, for instance, I stopped playing tennis because the training sessions were not fun. And so when I do a lesson with somebody, I'm making sure that they are enjoying the lesson. So when I give tips and tricks, I want to make sure they're enjoying the lesson. And I want to make sure that I don't take myself too seriously, because we have to be very honest. The people, they should not always say or do anything their coach is saying. They have to really understand that they have to make their own sauce of the tips and the tricks.
Mm-hmm.
Because I am not the best coach in the world. For some people, I am a very good coach. For some people, they should go to somebody else. I just say what I want to say. So I am not really focused on numbers or views, to be honest. Because if I am focused on views,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make a video about the kick smash every single week. Because that's what people want. So if I look to views, kick smash, V-bot attacking, aggression, gets tons of views. So it's mostly about that because I'm into learning.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what gives views, and the humor is what people like and what people don't. But some people just go for the information, some people go for the humor. But if somebody makes content business wise, I personally enjoy it more if it's an advertisement. Now some people are really good in making ads that are really, really funny, and I think it gives way more value to a brand.
Yeah. So we'll come to the economics, but what do you guys feel about the future for your specific channels? There's obviously an understanding that in the last 4 or 5 years, Paddle has really accelerated at a ridiculous rate. And you've probably noticed that with your views, you've noticed that with the approaches of sponsors, as you said, the professionalism around the event, perhaps even the bureaucracy. But do you guys feel like an urge to really take advantage of that growth? Do you feel like, okay, I need to do more, I need to grow my markets, I need to come up with more ideas, I need to create more content? Do you guys feel a surge or an urge to do more with what you've got? Or actually you're like, that was never the reason, and actually I'm doing what I'm doing. If it's getting more views, great. If it's not, it's not. I want to keep doing what I'm doing. As you said, Sven, kind of, I want to keep it a bit more honest to the original vision. How do you guys react to the growth of the industry in the last few years and what it means for your particular channels?
Well, I do. I'm kind of obsessed with it. I mean, for example, this season, this year, I had it clear that I wanted to be in as many Premier Padel tournaments as possible. But now in October, I figured out that it was so hard to maintain the level. And also at the same time, that to create content at the tournaments is not as easy as I thought, or I mean, or at least we don't have the proper approach to it. So now we are thinking about to pivot that idea and do something different. But yes, for sure, I'm quite upset with the idea of creating more content, but not just for the numbers or for the views or whatever, because I have so many different ideas that no one is doing it, or someone is doing it, but in somehow that I can do it better, that I want to do more and more. So that's my approach. So I want to do more, but not for the views, not for that, just to create.
You don't want to do a French language or Italian language
Been
channel?
waiting for the AI to implement on YouTube because Sven, you probably know, Alex, that YouTube is implementing the automatic translator with AI that my voice sounds the same in French or German or whatever, and you don't have to implement the subtitles. So that would be an amazing idea.
Yeah. When I started doing this, there were a lot of people saying, "Why don't you do it in Spanish as well? My Spanish is not good enough." And they're like, "Well, just get someone else to read it." And I was like, I feel similar to what you're saying, Pablo. I feel like AI is just around the corner, but if I do it now, it's going to look really bad, especially when you've got Spanish speakers who are answering in English and then get dubbed over by someone else in Spanish. It just feels like something's wrong if I'm doing that. But what about you, Sven? Yeah. And Pablo, do you find it frustrating kind of creating the content twice? I
100%. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, every day I'm thinking about when the fucking AI will arrive in YouTube because, for example, we do the post-tournament analysis. So what I do is to write the script in Spanish, translate it to English, recording myself in Spanish, recording myself in English, editing the video in Spanish, editing the video in English. Obviously, it's not twice the work because once you have the Spanish video done, you just need to proper edit the English one, but you have 80% of the work done. But anyways,
yeah.
I mean, it's so frustrating. But honestly, I do it with all my love, if you want to say it like that, because you see the comments of people that cannot understand anything if I were not there. So that's my salary. Many people like recognize me to thank you for translate an interview with LeBron after the match because we didn't get what LeBron said or what LeBron did on that match. So, for example, in Doha, Qatar, no one knew what happened there if you were not there, as I was, or if you were not able to speak Spanish. So, paddle needs to evolve
Yeah.
in that sense so much.
100%, because you Paddle has that incredible ability to listen to those changeovers, right? Where they're talking to themselves, where they're talking to the coaches, where the coaches are talking to them. That interaction is tells you everything about the emotion, the psychology, the tactics, the relationship, everything. And if you're a Spanish speaker, that is fantastic, right? That kind of access, you don't get that in any other sport. But if you're English, you're like, something amazing is happening, and I have no idea what's going on. Um, so yeah, I mean the Doha one was the obvious example,
And
but
because the language that the players or the coaches speaks during the bench is not Spanish. I mean, it's somehow like a paddle Spanish language because they have so many like weird phrases, weird expressions, a mix between Argentinian expressions, Spanish expressions. I mean, you can hear Lebron or Paquito speaking with Argentinian accent, and you don't know why, but they do it. So and they use Argentinian expressions that if you are not used to watch paddle or to have an Argentinian friend and you are from Madrid, you probably won't get it because are really like really Argentinian and you don't get it, no way. So imagine a guy from Norway, impossible. Even though he did his Erasmus in Granada or whatever, no way, impossible.
so actually you've got three languages, not
Somehow,
not not
somehow.
two. Well, yeah, because most of the coaches are Argentinian, so it makes sense. But so let's talk a little bit about the events, because Sven, as you mentioned, with the carpool karaoke in Rotterdam, you've been kind of invited into the tent a little bit more of these pro circuits, and Pablo, you as well. I know you were at Hexagon. You do some work at PPL. So you actually can talk a little bit about how things have changed, whether WPT is different from Premier, how PPL is different from Hexagon. How has that happened over time? Is it just the case that those tournament organizers have said, we're on YouTube or we're on our own OTT or we're on our own TV station? That's great. That's the traditional media piece. We all know and understand now that shoulder content with incredibly well followed influencers in that space is critical to any product. And you guys are obvious, from English speaking, from Spanish speaking, you guys give access to a passionate audience that most traditional broadcasters can't reach, at least not immediately. So I would assume that you guys get brought in and that it makes sense from a strategic point of view. But how have you found that experience? How did it start? Who approached who? And how has it changed over time? Like what's got better and what's got worse in terms of how you react to the event and what's going on at the event?
Yeah, I can start. Well, for me, it's just that some people they probably follow us, and then somebody that organizes the tournament, they ask you to be there or to make some content. So this is how it went for me, because I know some people that organized the World Padel Tour in Denmark, or they organized the Premier Padel in Rotterdam, and then they asked me to do some content there. And I think it's a very good method also to sell some tickets, because like in Rotterdam, it was a very big tournament, so they have space for 11,000 people. So they need influencers, they need help to sell tickets. So I think you could use me to sell some more tickets or to do some challenges. But there, on the other hand, there are some restrictions. So I also did some content for the Federation of the Netherlands in Premier Padel, but we were not allowed to record anything of the matches. You cannot post any rallies. This is a bit frustrating because there are many pages on Instagram who are only uploading rallies. They have a lot of views, but it's not really allowed what they do. And if we were doing that, I think we get a lot of problems, because there is a face to our YouTube channels or to our Instagram channels.
I know that feeling, Sven.
Yeah. I think we started with that very early on, but then it was fine, I think. And then kind of restrictions came and we follow the guidelines. But we were only allowed to do some recordings of the training. So every content piece that we have to get out, we have to kind of arrange with the players or with the people from the marketing of the players, because otherwise we are not allowed to make some content. So sometimes they have like an organization that arranges the content or the marketing of the players, and then they can help us to create some content. For instance, when I was doing in Denmark the Cooper interviews, the people that are handling the players, the managers, they asked them to be in the car with me, because it would be good for them content-wise and to help them gain some followers. It's really fun to make the content, but it's very challenging. It's very hard work to actually get them into the car, for instance. I've waited 2.5 hours on Lampetti to do an interview with me, because this guy is a really fun guy, but he doesn't need to rush. So it's a lot of hard work to put out one video. That's challenging. And then if you get like 10,000 views because my followers are more into English content, it's also frustrating. But I enjoyed it, so for me, it's already good. Yeah.
What about you, Pablo? Have you found that different tournaments have different approaches to that issue of access and rights, or just generally everyone seems to be tightening the leash?
Well, 100%, and it's a good debate if we want to open it like the TV rights or whatever we want to call it, because I'm more in the opinion side that obviously if someone pays for the TV rights for Premier, whatever, they have the rights. But until what point, I mean, is it a good idea to not allow any others to use, I don't know, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, or whatever they want to use it one day after, whatever? Or, I mean, because I have a different idea, and especially because Padel is growing, it's not football. I mean, I can assume that La Liga or the Premier League or whatever, they don't want others to use their images, but Padel needs to grow. And if they allow us to use the images, I mean, we can create good content that is gonna be different from Premier's Padel content or from World Padel Tour's content or whatever, because all of us are different artists, if we want to call it that way. So
I totally agree on this, because if we make content about what happens, I think the televisions, if you have Channel Plus, I think we can make them buy a membership. So I don't really understand why we cannot use small clips. Like, it's not the entire match, but I think our job is to promote Padel, and I don't need any money from Channel Plus or Red Bull TV. But if I could use like something to promote Padel or to highlight an event, I think it benefits everybody, because we are not to football yet. We need people from social media to hype it up.
Yeah. And Pablo, things have changed. Things have got more serious, and in terms of that, or because my sense is that initially you wouldn't have been invited because no one cared. Then they realized that shoulder content is helpful, so they're like, come in, do it, we love it. And now it's like the third phase, which is like, we want you to be there, but we definitely want to protect the rights of the people who are paying more than we're protecting you. So it's a kind of, now it's like this middle ground, strange minefield where you're like, do this, but don't do that. If you could do this, that would be great, but don't look there, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the tournament and the organizer and whatever, because Premier Padel has like a clear guidelines. The PPL has a different approach, the Hexagon Cup as well. So, I mean, in the past, for example, World Padel Tour had a really clear guidelines, and probably like Sven, we have a face behind the YouTube channel. There are other YouTube channels or Instagram accounts that they just upload some points or highlights or whatever, and they are hide somehow behind a name or a nickname. So the problem is that I did upload some court images in the past from, for example, from Premier Padel, and obviously the copyright didn't jump immediately, because those images were filmed by us, but they watch the videos, like they watch our channel and they recognize that those images are not allowed. But the problem is that, I mean, those images were just like a really close frame of Arturo Coye doing a volley, whatever. You don't get I mean, you it's impossible.
No context, no
Just
score,
a slow
no.
motion of Arturo doing a volley, a slow motion of Arturo and Agustin hugging each other on the court, like just to emphasize what I'm trying to say. Like, we are not doing like a highlight video or no. I mean, I respect that you are doing the broadcast of the event, but allow me to do something with the images. I mean, I think a good differentiation could be, all right, you cannot use anyway, like no way, the images from Red Bull TV. All right, but if I go to the tournament, I can film myself and I can do it by myself, like slow motion, whatever. And please allow me to use that. I'm not gonna post an entire point of whatever, but at least something.
For a long time, news outlets received rights of, like, as Sven said, like 15 seconds or 30 seconds of footage that you could put into the news segment of your normal TV. Like, why something similar can't be created for the shoulder content creators to say, listen, we're not trying to tell you what the score is. Maybe you can say it can't be match point, but it can be 1 point or it can be 30 seconds, and it helps us put our content into context without giving away any of the value that is within the broadcast rights. Yeah, I think you're both right in the sense that Paddle is not at the point where it can afford to be this protectionist around its rights. And there are people who've put a lot of time, sweat, and love into helping Paddle grow, and they have an incredible audience which meets some of your objectives, whether it's driving ticket sales or creating awareness. Why not support them to some degree rather than kind of shut them down completely?
Because how many paddle tournaments are sold out every day?
Not many.
So you
Not
should
many.
find a way. Okay, what can we do to sell tickets on Wednesday morning, Wednesday evening? How can we get people to go to the courts on Tuesday? And I think you can use social media to kind of push that. And we need, if you put images of the matches, people really want to see it. Because if you see Quayle doing a kick smash out of the court and Paquito getting it, playing it into the net, and then people were like, oh, okay, I need to watch this. So I don't really understand why it's so difficult.
Let's move on to the economics of content creation. So I guess the main question is, have both of your channels got to the point where they are kind of self-sustained businesses? It's obvious that you guys are making revenue, but the question is whether you don't have to give away numbers, but is it like a standalone business now? And I guess the other part of that I'd love to know is like what percentage comes from what? Like what percentage comes from YouTube? What percentage comes from someone paying for the content? What percentage comes from sponsors? Can you give me just an overview of what a content creation business and revenues looks like, without going, obviously to the extent that you feel comfortable and without giving any confidential information, but percentages or ballparks would be really helpful. Are you able to share that, either of you guys?
Well, on YouTube, you get X amount per 1,000 views. So for me, that's a really hard number to say because it depends where the viewers are coming from. I earn less from somebody that's viewing from Spain and more from somebody that's viewing from the UK or from Sweden. And it all depends on how good the video is and how many views you get. So we have to work very hard on getting a very high quality video every single week because that will generate more views. I earn nothing from Instagram, nothing from TikTok is 0 euros, unfortunately. But it's all to push people to YouTube because that's where you get your revenue. And I also have this kind of membership program where people can send in their technique or their match, and I analyze their match and I put them on this safe space on YouTube. So if you pay a membership fee to my channel, you can become a member, and only the members can see a specific part of the content. So if somebody uploads or sends me a video of their match, only those people that are member can see that. So it's not for everybody to see because not everybody wants their entire match on the internet. And people can pay 5 euros or 30 euros a month. So I have around 50 people that have the membership. So that's some part of the earnings. I think the biggest part is a sponsor, somebody that pays for me holding the racket, or for me having a shop that pays me for making 20 videos a month about rackets. And also some other sponsors that pay me to highlight or wear any items in the store. For instance, Stocks High Compressor or a court builder or a clothing company. So this is where better revenue is coming from because you only have to wear a specific amount of clothing or you don't have to create the videos.
Do clubs come to you, Sven, and ask you to film content at their venue?
Yeah. So in the beginning, sometimes I asked to record a video inside somebody's court. It was like, yeah, you have to pay. And then at some point you get big enough that somebody says, okay, no, you can use the court, it's fine. And some people understand it, some people don't. And then at some point it's like, can you record at our place? And we pay you to record at our place. So now I think the content is going more to collaboration posts on Instagram, so that I create content with another brand and they will pay something for that video to highlight it. And I think it's gonna go more in that direction because people really like also the short form of content. And also it's very easy for them to click from an Instagram video towards their website. So I think it's more of collaboration with brands that earns more money than the actual revenue you get from a video, because also YouTube takes 60% of the cash you earn. So that's quite a lot. But I do this together with my girlfriend, but we can both live from this. But I also do things for the federation. I also do other things or some lessons. Making content takes the most of my time, I think, in a week.
And what about you, Pablo?
Well, this season, I would say 40% of my incomes comes from YouTube, like AdSense, ad revenue, and the other 60 comes from collaborations. As Sven said, you don't get anything direct from Instagram or from TikTok, but you, or at least us, we get paid by do some collaborations on Instagram and on TikTok with different brands. So that's some like the big image of our income cake is more or less 40% from YouTube, 60% from sponsors, collaboration, and so on.
And do you get, like, as you were alluding to, Sven, that now you can afford to be more passive about approaches? So you're getting approached by clubs, you're getting approached by sponsors. Pablo, with your stuff, are you finding players and brands coming to you almost? I'm not saying that there's a bidding war or anything like that, but do you find that it's actually now your question is not, God, who do I need to approach? It's more like, who do I need to not carry? Like, because I'm being approached by 10 players to do something in Paris, for example. I don't have the ability to do all 10 of them. I now actually need to choose which I can put into my content and which I can't. Have you got to that point where you can afford to pick and
Yeah,
choose?
for sure. And actually, I have the problem this year that we have signed at the end of the year so many content with different brands that now in October, I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to do it at the end of the year or not. Because
Mhm.
I mean, I was maybe so brave or I don't know how. Yeah,
Optimistic.
too optimistic. So now I know that with some brands I promise them somehow that we are gonna do many different things, and we are not gonna be able to do it. But most of the times, the problem comes from the calendar and with the organization the staff due to the players. I mean, for example, with entity data, we have so many different ideas to do with their ambassadors, and as the calendar is so full, we cannot do it. I mean, players are never in Madrid, and when they are competing in any tournament, they don't want to do it because they are just focused on competition. So, I mean, a learning for the next year.
And
Yes, that's quite difficult with the availability of the players because also they need to have a clear schedule, and it's never the case at the moment.
yeah, I mean, when I was working at the ATP, we always used to go to the big tournaments to try and speak to the players, but it was the tournaments where they least wanted to speak to anybody because, first of all, they would have most of their family around with them. And second of all, they were focused on performing because they're the most important tournaments. So you're like, I actually found that I could do much more interesting conversations and relaxed conversations with players when I went to the much smaller events because they didn't have their entourage around them and they weren't so concerned about the results, or they were relaxed until the last few days. So I assume it's probably the same from your guys' point of view, because if you try and speak to Paquito on the Friday night in Paris, is very different from if you try and speak to Paquito in Menorca on Wednesday. Well, one of my big concerns in the paddle scene at the moment is the inability of most of the heroes to speak English. And I know that in Argentina and Spain, which is obviously or South America, those are key markets. That's not a problem and fine. But as everyone, including the Qataris, Premier Padel, sponsors, they're all looking events. They're all looking to make significant impact in non-Spanish speaking countries. They need those heroes to translate, and they don't. And that's a real gap at the moment. How frustrating is that for you guys? I mean, you mentioned it, Sven, with regards to the carpool. You had a bit of a challenge there. It's probably less relevant to the type of content that you do, but it would be much easier if you could have English speaking players come in and do stuff with you. And Pablo, same with you. Like when you're doing your content, the Spanish stuff is great, but if you're trying to do an English version of it, subject to AI or subtitles, you're in a bit of a pickle.
Exactly, and with English, there's less content also. So a lot of people they really want to know how the players are like behind the scenes. Like I did an interview with Paquito, and that was really fun because his English is good enough to do an interview, and it's really funny. But if it's like Chingoto, this guy is super hilarious, but because he can only speak Spanish, I think he will gain a lot of followers if Chingoto could speak English because this guy is hilarious.
Yeah.
So for them, it would be much better to speak English. Like Alejandra and Gemma, very good English, and also they get many fans everywhere because their English is super high level and they have a very nice aura around them how to handling situations with the press. So yeah, I think they will benefit a lot if they can speak English.
Is that your experience as well, Pablo?
Yeah, obviously, but it's a matter of time. I mean, don't forget that 5 years ago, when World Padel Tour was the only tour that exists, 80% of the tournaments were in Spain, others in South America. So at the end, players came from a story, or from whatever what you want to call it. Like, they didn't need to speak English, because 80% of the tournaments were in Spain. 95% of their incomes came from Spain, Argentina, whatever, from Spanish speakers country. So at the end, it just need time, and not just for the Spanish speakers players, but for others to come. I mean, I don't know when, but probably in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, that guy will arise in the top 30, the top players, an Italian, a Swedish. So that will help the internationalization of the tour, alongside with the evolution of the tours and the internationalization of the tour itself, like playing in many, many more countries. But for sure, I mean, if I were a top player, like, I don't know, LeBron or whoever, I will take seriously English lessons, at least just to be able to say some phrases after the match, to give some joy to the audience there. Like, hey, hello Rotterdam, very happy to be here. See you next year. That's it. But at least try it, because obviously everyone knows that you are from Spain, from Argentina. No worries. I mean, English is not your mother language. Like, you are gonna have accent. You are gonna make mistakes. No worries, but people will appreciate it. So at least that's what I do. I know my English is not the best, but I just jump onto the pool.
Yeah, I think you see Djokovic who tries lots of different languages, and every tournament it really warms the audience to him.
Yeah, exactly. So when I was coaching in Marbella, I made a sport out of it to say nice shot in every language in my group. So I had one Swedish, to say "Goed bra," and to do like just one phrase, and I connect them better than to the kids because they enjoy it. So I think if you just learn one sentence, it's nice. Like Paquito in the interview always says two things: Padel is easy, and don't play with your wife. So this is his standard phrase, but it's nice. It works every single time, and he gains followers with that. So it's not a coincidence that that's one of the most liked players from fans.
So I wanted to. We're in the last few minutes or last few questions. So we kind of talked about content, but just more generally, two of my last questions are: what has been your biggest frustration since you started, or like the biggest loss? And on the other side, what has been the biggest success or most rewarding moment where you were like, wow, that was awesome. Like I didn't, this was kind of what I hoped it would be, or this was my beyond my wildest dreams. What was the big win and the big loss in your journey so far?
Well, I think the frustration part is maybe people copying the content, but to the point where it's like exactly the same and not an improvement. Because if people copy my content, but they copy it and they make it better than I did, I'm fine with that. So that's kind of a frustration because I did videos about paddle stereotypes, and then people just copy the exact same content. I think with Pablo, there was once like the match point in slow motion that you did. Do you remember that one? So the match
That my
point in
friend
slow motion.
pushed me.
Yeah, exactly. And then people just copy his entire video. I don't really like that people do it. It's like a compliment because they like the content that we make, but do it better or do it a little bit in your own style, in my opinion. So for me, I find this difficult questions about biggest win and biggest loss. I don't really think that way. I already think that 50,000 subscribers is something that I would never thought I would achieve. But on the other hand, I think if I can get 50,000, I can get to 100,000. So I always thinking, how can I do better than something else? Biggest win would say like some videos that didn't do that I thought were not so good that they do really really well. And biggest loss is what I would say is that I cannot make videos sometimes that I think is really good for the player. So I did two videos on the physical part of paddle, like move better, how to actually train your body in a way that benefits you on the court, nobody cares. So that's my biggest loss, is that I cannot truly make something that I think people will watch the most. I kind of need to put a coat on it to make it close enough to paddle so people like it. That's what I say is most challenging.
And what about you, Pablo? Biggest win, biggest loss?
I was thinking at the same time that Sven was talking. I have so many wins and just a few losses. I mean, but if I just take one win, I would say the first paddle trip that I did. It was in Sweden with the opening of Ultimate Padel Club. That was, in my opinion, the best padel club that I've seen at that time. Unfortunately, now it's closed. But that trip, sorry, that trip, it was the first time that I traveled with professional padel players. The first time that someone treated me like a professional padel player, like in the same van, in the same restaurants, in the same the same way that they treat a padel player. And actually, that was in the same time frame. Let's call it that way. When I decided to bet everything on the content creation of padel, so that was like all right. I mean, if I start taking this seriously and this happen, what else can happen in the future? So I will say that that was my biggest win, and my worst loss. Oof, I mean, what Sven said is quite frustrating. Uh, but honestly, I don't know. I know my worst loss. No,
Yeah, it's hard.
no.
Sometimes you just try a video and it doesn't get the amount of views, but at least that's the worst thing that can happen. It's not that you lose money. You only lose time to make like a bad piece of content.
Well, I can tell you that 2 or 3 years ago, I've been in Dubai for the Dubai Padel Cup. It was an event made by the Dubai government. So I paid that trip from my money because I knew a friend that lives there. So I stayed the whole week with him. And the first day was so frustrated because the organization didn't come with me in anything. They didn't allow me to do anything. So I was like, all right, so what I'm doing here in Dubai? So I talked with the players directly, like, please help me to do something. So Garrido, Lucho, Koki, and many others were like trying to help me to organize some interviews on whatever. But those first days were super frustrating, super. But I don't know if it's my worst loss or not, but at least comes to my mind.
And last question before we wrap up, guys. Thank you for your time on this again. Like, what do you think is the future for your content brands? Like, is it, we talked about more engagement as paddle grows, but are you thinking about internationalization? Are you thinking about adding different verticals to your business? What's the future of the content creator business around paddle generally? Do you see more rivals? Do you see?
Yeah, I think it gets a little bit like a jungle sometimes because we have to be careful that paddle doesn't get too commercial. And I think now it's a time that people that doesn't have a paddle heart are jumping into the paddle scene, which is very complicated because they're in there for the money. And I think the biggest people on social media like paddle a lot. Like Manu Martin has 300,000 followers, but he just likes paddle a lot. He is paddle. He, of course, he earns a lot of money, but it's not his first priority. So I think we have to get very close or stick close to our authentic self to create the content. So we should always try to improve our content. For me, I would be looking into doing maybe some different type of content. Also, to do more collaborations with people, to do more storyline content is one of my goals. To create like a story or to build like a player up. So do a series with somebody that started paddle, and I do a video with them every couple of weeks, so you can see the development of the player. Because I think you always have to be like one step ahead of the competition because we have people that copy us. But I think what we do is to create like new content or to think of what is the new thing we can highlight. I might go to do some online courses for coaches, because I also think there are many paddle coaches, but also many paddle coaches that are not able to play the bandeja, not able to play the kick smash. And I think it's also maybe a job for me to help them a little bit to get some more skills.
And what about you, Pablo? What's the future for the El Cuatro Set empire?
Well, I totally agree with Sven that in the future, and has happened in the past, that people start creating content just because they see it as a business. That, in my opinion, is a good approach. I mean, it's not bad, but in my opinion, the passion will make the difference, because obviously Sven and I think we do it first by passion, then more in a business side, whatever you want to call it, but passion is not negotiable. So people will make the difference, will notice that difference between different creators. But obviously, once Padel gets the boom in the US, many people will arise to create content in English or even in Spanish or whatever. So I mean, this is a normal evolution. From my point of view, what I wanna try to do the next season is to be, or at least to implement, the professional tour with my personal side. I mean, we want to do more blogs. We want to do more like more a personal side of myself, and not just for the professional tour. Like I need to figure it out how to do it well, but that is somehow that we want to focus more on the content.
Got it. Well, guys, thank you so much. That pretty much wraps up our episode. Again, please like, share, and subscribe if the content was thought provoking. Please comment on LinkedIn or Twitter if you have any recommendations around our format, topics we should devote an episode to, questions we should ask, speakers we simply need to bring on. We want you all, those driving the next phase of this industry's future, to tell us what you want to hear about and who from. Thank you, Sven and Pablo, for joining us today. We will keep doing our best to cover all the angles of the business around paddle, episode after episode. Till the next one.